Errol Flynn was born Errol Leslie Thompson Flynn on June 20, 1909, in Hobart, Tasmania, Australia. Flynn Waste, son of Theodore Thompson Flynn, a well-respected ocean scientist and teacher, and Lily Mary Young. From when he was very young, he showed he didn't like following rules or doing things the normal way. Instead, he showed a wild spirit and love for adventure that would shape both his personal life and his career. He got kicked out of several schools for bad behavior. Flynn was a rebelling before that became part of his public image, before Hollywood found him. Flynn lived a life that already sounded like a movie. As a young man, he worked at different jobs, like a sailor, miner, boxer, and plantation boss in Papua New Guinea. These experiences made him tougher and stronger, and gave him the rough charm that later amazed audiences. His first try at acting came in Australia, where he appeared in Vecchi film In the Wake of the Bounty, 1933, playing Fletcher Christian. Though he wasn't perfect yet, Flynn's natural talent on camera was clear, and it soon caught the attention of Warner Brothers, who brought him to Hollywood. Flynn's Resetto fame was lightning fast. In 1935, he appeared in Captain Blood, a film that would turn him overnight into an international star. With high athletic movements, contagious smile, and DC confidence, Flynn redefined the action hero for a new generation. Have allowed the success with a bunch of famous roles, including The Charge Off Light Brigade, 1936, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, Da Seahawk, 1940, and Dodge City, 1939. These films locked in his image as the perfect, heroic adventurer, brave, romantic, honorable, and incredibly charming. His pairing with actress Olivia de Havilland became one of Hollywood's most loved screen partnerships, marked by warmth, humor, and a sense of real respect that looked beautiful on screen. Yet, Errol Flynn was far more than just a sword-fighting romantic lead. He was a skilled and sometimes underrated actor who wanted to be taken serious, like buying his movie star good looks. In film sack As They Died with Their Boots On, 1941, Gentleman Jim, 1942, and later The Sun Also Rises, 1957. Flynn showed depth, emotion, and dramatic range. He also surprised critics with his performance in That Forsyte Woman, 1949, proving he could go beyond the action hero role when given the chance. Off camera, Flynn lived just as wildly as he performed. His personal life was famously messy, marked by multiple marriages, scandal, and a reputation for going overboard. His heavy drinking, wild lifestyle, and ignoring limits took a clear toll on his health and career. Legal troubles and public controversies made things even worse, often covering up his artistic achievements. Despite these struggles, Flynn remained a magnetic and fascinating person to the end. In the 1950s, as Hollywood's golden age faded and his health got worse, he continued to work, often in independent films and international productions. His latar performances carried a sense of rudeness and deep thought that gave them a haunting realness. Flynn himself seemed to know that his legend couldn't be separated from his flaws. He once said with typical honesty that he had lived life at full speed. No matter what happened over the course of his life, Flynn was married 3 times, and each marriage showed a different chapter in his wild's journey, marked by romance, glamour, heartbreak, and lasting legacy. His first marriage was to French actress Lily Demita, whom he married in 1935 at the height of his quick rise to fame. Their marriage was full of old-fashioned elegance and Hollywood excess, but it was also strained by Flynn's demanding career and restless spirit. The couple had one son, Sean Flynn, born in 1941, who would later live a remarkable and tragic life of his own as a war photographer during the Vietnam War. Despite the love they once shared, Flynn and Demita divorced in 1942, bringing an end to a relationship that had been closely followed by Thepris. Just a year later, Flynn married Nora Eddington, a bright and lively actress who became his second wife in 1943. Their marriage gave them 2 daughters, Deirdre, born in 1945, and Rory, born in 1947. For a while, Flynn appeared to be settling into family life, balancing being a dad with his ongoing film career. However, the pressures of fame, personalexis, and an increasingly messily test took their toll. The marriage eventually ended in divorce in 1949. Another chapter closing in Flynn's complicated personal history. In 1950, Flynn married for the third and final time, choosing actress Patrice Wimore as his partner. This marriage lasted until Flynn's early death in 1959 and gave them 1 daughter, Arnella Roma Flynn, born in 1953, though troubled by Flynn's declining health and growing personal struggles. The relationship lasted through the final years of his life, offering a glimpse of stability in the chaos that surrounded him. Flynn's legacy did not end with his own generation. Through his daughter Rory, he became the grandfather on his mother's side of actor Sean Flynn, who later gained fame starring in the popular television series Zoe 101. In this way, Errol Flynn's influencers far beyond his own screen career, continuing through his children and grandchildren, a reminder that behind the legendary image of that ashing Hollywood bad boy was a complex family man whose story still matters decades after his death. In the dark corners of Golden Age Hollywood, few stars showed off masculina brava as completely as Errol Flynn. Swashbuckling, reckless, and boldly charismatic, Flynn projected an Imagine Studios eagerly sold to the public, ultimate ladies' man. Yet, behind that carefully created myth was a far more complicated emotional world, one shaped by secrecy, survival, and a studio system that mandated strict conformity. Among the most lasting whispers surrounding Flynn's private life is his rumored romantic connection with fellow MGM star Robert Taylor. At the time, such a relationship, if admitted, would have ended both men's careers. Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s was controlled by morality clauses, studio surveillance, and an unspoken but harshly enforced rule. Being gay must never be visible. Flynn himself, in later reflections, reportedly spoke with tired irony of Booth's life he was expected to perform. They didn't want a man, he is, said to have remarked. They wanted a legend, one that never contradicted itself. Robert Taylor, trained by MGM as the perfect example of refined masculinity, faced similar pressures. The studio arranged relations, marriages, and publicity of parents to reinforce his straight image. Any deviation, even a rumor, was treated as a threat to millions of dollars in box office revenue. Within that environment, emotional intimacy between 2 men could insist only in silence. Flynn understood this deal well. You learned early what could be spoken and what could only be lived, he reflected. Hollywood was interested in truth. It was interested in consistency. If Flynn and Taylor did share a private relationship, keeping quiet was not just preference, it was protection. Both men had highly publicized relations with women, not always out of desire, but necessity. Theirs are relationships worked as armor, protecting them from suspicion and allowing them to move through public life unchallenged. The secrecy took its toll. Flynn, who often used humor to avoid deep thinking, acknowledged the cost of that double life. The hardest part wasn't hiding, he admitted. It was pretending the hiding didn't change you. What modern audience must understand is that this was not being fake. It was survival. In an arousing careers, contracts, and even freedom could be lost overnight. Silence was often the only option. The studio system rewarded obedience and punished honesty by the time cultural attitudes began to shift decades later. Flynn was long gone, his public image frozen in film. Yet the re-looking at Hollywood history allows room for understanding. At last, the idea that Flynn's life contained dimensional complexities beyond the official story does not make his legend smaller. It makes it bigger. As Flynn himself summed up with Tippy Cowblins, "I lived the life they needed to live. The rest belonged to me." Today, that quiet truth speaks louder than the myths ever did. By the autumn of 1959, the amazing life Errol Flynn had once lived, marked by swashbuckling garricks on screen and a reckless appetite for pleasure off it, had narrowed to a harsh reality of debt, failing health, and fading fortune. Once one of Hollywood's most profitable stars, Flynn now found himself struggling to stay afloat financially. So desperate that on October 9th, Heggett, on a flight to Vancouver, British Columbia, hoping to negotiate the lease of his beloved yacht, Zaka, the boat, long a symbol of his romantic wandering spirit, had become less a luxury than a financial lifeline. The man he hoped would save him was businessman George Caldo, and going with Flynn on that trip was 17-year-old actress Beverly Odland, whose presence would later add a haunting layer of controversy and tragedy to the final days of Flynn's life. What began as a routine business trip quickly took a darker turn. On October 14th, Caldo drove Flynn and Odland toward the airport for their return flight to Los Angeles. Flynn suddenly began complaining of intense pain shooting through his back and down his legs. The discomfort was severe enough to alarm those with him. Recognizing that something was seriously wrong, Caldo changed course and drove to the home of Dr. Grant Gould. Flynn, once known for jumping across sets with athletic ease, now struggled visibly just to climb the stairs of the building. An unsettling sight for a man whose public image had been built on strength and physical bravado. Dr. Gould examined Flynn and decided the pain was likely the result of degenerative disc disease and spinalostosis, illnesses that made sense with Flynn's age and hard-living past. To ease the suffering, Gould gave him an injection through his veins, 50 milligrams of DEMEROL. As the medication began to take effect and the pain went away, Flynn relaxed, his voice growing animated. In a touching, almost movie-like moment, he began remembering at length about his past, his adventures, his triumphs, his life lived at full speed. Those present listened as the once mythic star drifted backward through memory, revisiting the very experiences that had made him famous and infamous. Notably, when offered a drink, Flynn roofs, an unusual act for a man whose excesses were legendary, and one that now reads like a quiet, tragic tale of his final hours. Afterward, Dr. Gould massaged Flynn's legs in the bedroom of the apartment and told him to lie down and rest before continuing to the airport. Flynn reportedly said, "Heffled, ever so much better." Words that would soon take on a heartbreaking journey. Roughly 20 minutes later, Beverly Odland went to check on him. Instead of finding Flynn resting, she found him unresponsive. Panic followed. Dr. Gould immediately attempted emergency medical treatment, and Flynn was rushed by ambulance to Vancouver General Hospital. Despite the speed of the response and the efforts of medical staff, Errol Flynn never woke up. He was pronounced dead later that evening at just 50 years old. The official findings painted a sad picture of a body worn down by years of strain. The coroner's report and death certificate listed the cause of death as a myocardial infarction, commonly known as a heart attack, brought on by coronary thrombosis and coronary atherosclerosis. Contributing factors included fatty degeneration of the liver and partial cirrhosis, conditions severe enough to be formally noted. In the aftermath of his death, it was also reported that Flynn had previously gotten treatment for genital warts, a detail that showed the extent to which his health had quietly gotten worse behind the glamorous facade. Errol Flynn's death marked the end of one of Hollywood's most colorful and willed lives. He left behind a son, 2 daughters, and both of his parents, along with a legacy that remains as complex as it is captivating, once the perfect example of movie adventure and masculine charm. Flindied far from the spotlight, undone not be a single dramatic event, but by years saf excess, exhaustion, and decline. His final journey, meant to rescue a failing fortune, instead became the classing chapter of a legend whose life burned brilliantly and briefly against the golden age of Hollywood.